Vincent McAviney has been travelling with the British Prime Minister to Buenos Aires. Good morning, Vinny. So you were speaking to the Prime Minister on that flight. Now she is going to be meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, buenos dias from Buenos Aires, Isabel. That's right, I was just flying overnight with the Prime Minister, Theresa May, on her RAF Voyager plane. And at one point in the flight, she gave us a press conference in the cabin. And I asked her about meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince. Now, we knew that Theresa May was having a one-on-one meeting with the Argentinian president today, but we didn't know what other meetings she got. We think she's got about 5 of them. But she confirmed to me on that flight that she would be meeting one-on-one with the Saudi Crown Prince. And she said she wasn't going to shy away from the issue. She told me that in relation to Khashoggi, she wants to see a full and transparent investigation in relation to what happened, and obviously those responsible being held to account. She also opened it up to Yemen, saying on the issue of Yemen, we continue to be deeply concerned about the humanitarian situation. We want a long-term solution to the Yemen. It is a political situation, and we'll be encouraging all parties to work together for a political situation. So some quite strong language from Prime Minister Theresa May on dealing with the Khashoggi issue directly with the Crown Prince, when you bear in mind that the UK has a very close relationship with Saudi Arabia, both in terms of trade. It's one of the UK's biggest partners and something they want to build on post-Brexit, and with security and intelligence as well.
Well, high tension on trade, as you're mentioning, not least because the President Donald Trump and the President of China, Xi Jinping, are going to meet. What's on the cards there, Vinny?
Well, trade, tax reform and climate change are the big issues being discussed at this G20 meeting. And of course, everyone will be watching those bilaterals between President Trump, who has tried to rewrite the rules of world trade. So in that meeting with Xi Jinping, both leaders have been ratcheting up tariffs against the other's products. That has, we heard in that clip from Donald Trump a moment ago, that he's pretty happy with the current situation, but he might be willing to do a deal. He is the self-described king of deal making. So that will definitely be one to watch. In their meetings previously one-on-one, they've always seemed to get on quite well. Donald Trump has spoke fondly of Xi Jinping, but then on Twitter and then with his actions in these tariffs, he then seems to like to strike out at him. So it'll definitely be interesting, as always, to watch President Trump. We know he's not having that bilateral now with President Vladimir Putin. And I think Theresa May as well, on the topic of trade, she will be urging for reforms of the WTO, and she's going to try possibly to use that window without Angela Merkel to build some support for her Brexit deal. She'll really need that to try to get MPs behind her on it.
And changing tack slightly, Vinny, G20 summits are often the focus of violent protests. What's the sense there? How tight is security?
Well, that's right. We're expecting a protest later on here today in Buenos Aires. But on the drive from the airport, I've got to say there was intense security. There were roadblocks. We were in a motorcade surrounded by protection. All of the exits on the motorway were blocked off. And just walking through the city since I've arrived here, there is a heavy police presence. They seem to be on every corner. Lots of police vehicles doing patrols as well. So I think they're very much prepared for any violent demonstrations that could take place. But the leaders themselves, they are well out of the city. They're about 45 minutes away from where I'm standing now, through a series of roadblocks and perimeter fences. So they will be very unlikely to see any of it, apart from on their TVs, of course.
So big issues on the table at that G20 summit amid tight security. Thanks so much, Vinny. Over Russia's refusal to release Ukraine naval ships. Well, NBC's Bill Neely is in Moscow, and he sent us this report.
President Trump's announcement that he was cancelling his meeting with President Putin was a surprise to everyone, including, it seems, the Kremlin. The Kremlin clearly caught off guard by this. They have had no official forewarning or no official information on that. A Kremlin spokesman telling NBC News, "We are flying to Argentina. So far, we've seen only the tweet and the media reports. We have no official information." But the spokesman said President Putin will hold a couple of other useful meetings if Trump has indeed refused to meet him. Now, in cancelling that meeting, President Trump cited the naval clash at the weekend between Russian and Ukrainian ships. He said, based on the fact that the ships and the sailors have not been returned to Ukraine from Russia, I've decided it would be best for all parties concerned to cancel. Now, the interesting thing about that is that the sailors and the ships are not being held, as the president said, in Russia. They're being held in Crimea. The United States does not recognize the Russian annexation of Crimea in 2014. Now, that was either a slip of the pen or of the tweet by President Trump, or perhaps he doesn't understand that Crimea is not part of Russia. He also talked about, I've decided it would be best for all parties concerned to cancel. This is a president who is responsible for the national interests of the United States, not what's best for Moscow. And plenty of critics, I'm sure, will pick up on President Trump's remarks there.
Now, French President Emmanuel Macron has left the French government to deal with more yellow vest protests planned for this weekend. The Prime Minister is set to meet representatives of the yellow vests later today as he tries to diffuse their anger, hoping to avoid a repeat of last week's violence. Well, joining me now live from Paris is our correspondent Annelise Borges. Good morning, Annelise. So some ministers have already met representatives of the yellow vests, but have they actually managed to calm anything down?
Well, not as of yet. Good morning, Isabel. The French government has indeed been organizing these meetings between representatives of the government and representatives of the movement, the so-called Yellow Vests movement. And the energy minister met with two representatives on Tuesday. And the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, is set to host Yellow Vest representatives this afternoon at his office. But the difficulty here for the French government has been to actually identify who speaks on behalf of the Yellow Vests because of the nature of this movement. This is a grassroots movement that doesn't really have a leader per se. And so it's been really difficult for the French government to actually engage in negotiations with the demonstrators. And they say that the meeting on Tuesday, for example, was extremely disappointing. Whether or not Edouard Philippe can actually come up with something to propose to them and to change their minds about that demonstration on Saturday, for example, is anyone's guess at this stage. At least for now, they do have a list of demands that was posted on social media on Wednesday, a very wide and ambitious list of demands that includes, for example, the scrapping of the French Senate and for French voters to propose and vote on legislation themselves.
And Annelise, I can see barricades behind you, a police car. There are obviously security concerns and concerns over violence since last Saturday's protests, which broke out into violence. What have authorities planned?
Well, I'm currently standing on the Champs-Élysées, the stage of those very violent protests last Saturday, and with less than 24 hours to go until another protest is expected here in the French capital. Police are not wasting any time. I'm going to step aside just to give you an idea of what they've been working on here this morning. They've been erecting barriers alongside the entire avenue that is roughly a kilometer long. They are going to be setting up IDs and bags checks throughout this avenue. So whoever plans to come here on Saturday better come prepared and with a lot of patience, because they will have their IDs checked, their bags checked, and the police, the Interior Ministry, is announcing that at least 4,000 security officers will be here on the Champs-Élysées, plus the entire Paris police. And the idea, of course, is to avoid a repeat of the scenes of violence that occurred here last weekend.
So security being stepped up on the streets of Paris. Thanks so much, Annelise Borges, for that update.